Lesson 21, Returning Data as XML. In this lesson, you will learn to use XML data returned from the server via the response XML property of the XML HTTP request object. The topics we will cover in Lesson 21 are adding the X to AJAX, the response XML property, and project an RSS headline reader. The X in AJAX does, of course, stand for XML, and there are good reasons for using the power of XML in your applications. This is particularly true when you need to use highly structured information and/or perform complex translations between different types of data representation. The XML HTTP request object has a further property called response XML, which can be used to transfer information from the server via XML rather than in text strings. JavaScript's document object model methods can help you process this XML information. This lesson looks at these techniques and hopefully gives you a taste of what AJAX applications can achieve when leveraging the power of XML. Whereas the response text property of the XML HTTP request object contains a string, response XML can be treated as if it were an XML document. The complete structure and data contained in the XML document can now be made available by using JavaScript's DOM methods. Later on, we'll demonstrate this with another working AJAX application, but first let's talk about a few new JavaScript DOM methods. This lesson looks at the DOM methods that can be used to actually create elements, thereby changing the structure of the page. The document object model can be thought of as a tree-like structure of nodes. As well as reading the values associated with those nodes, you can create and modify the nodes themselves, thereby changing the structure and content of your document. To add new elements to a page, you need to first create the elements and then attach them to the appropriate point in your DOM tree. Let's look at a simple example using the following HTML document. In this example, we want to add the text, "Hello World," to the div container in the document body. We'll put our JavaScript routine into a function that will call from the body's onload event handler. First, we'll use the JavaScript DOM method called createTextNode to, create a text node. We now need to attach TextNode to the DOM tree of the document at the appropriate point. You may recall that nodes in a document are said to have children if they contain other document elements. JavaScript has an append_child method which allows us to attach our new text node to the DOM tree by making it a child node of an existing document node. In this case, we want our text to be inside the div container having the ID display div. Let's look at the complete source of the page after wrapping up this JavaScript code into a function and adding the onload event handler to execute it. This figure shows the browser display after loading this page. When you want to create other page elements besides text nodes, you can do so using the createElement method, which works pretty much like createTextNode. We could, in fact, have used createElement to create the div container itself prior to adding our "Hello World" text node. In general, you simply pass the type of the required page element as an argument to createElement to generate the required type of element. This tutorial is not just about JavaScript DOM techniques, so we're not going to reproduce here a comprehensive guide to all the available methods and properties. However, this table itemizes some of the more useful ones. Now, let's take what we've learned about returning XML data from the server and use these techniques to tackle a new project. XML data is made available on the Internet in many forms. One of the most popular is the RSS feed, a particular type of XML source usually containing news or other topical and regularly updated items. RSS feeds are available from many sources on the web and include most broadcast companies and newspaper publishers, as well as specialist sites for all manner of subjects. We'll write an AJAX application to take a URL for an RSS feed, collect the XML, and list the titles and descriptions of the news items contained in the feed. This is part of the XML for a typical RSS feed. We see that we are dealing with RSS version 0.91 in this case. The versions of RSS differ quite a bit, but for the purposes of our example, we only care about the title, link, and description elements for the individual news items, which remain essentially unchanged from version to version. Our page needs to contain an input field for us to enter the URL of the required RSS feed and a button to instruct the application to collect the data. We also will have a div container in which to display our parsed data. If we save this code to a file rss.htm and load it into our browser, we would see something like the display shown in this figure. The means of creating an instance of the XML HTTP request object, constructing and sending a server request, and checking when that request has been completed are all carried out much as in previous examples. This time, however, instead of using response text, we will be receiving data in XML via the response XML property. We'll use that data to modify the DOM of our HTML page to show the news items' titles and descriptions in a list within the page's div container. Each title and description will be contained in its own paragraph element, which we'll also construct for the purpose and be styled via a style sheet to display as we want. Let's jump right in and look at the code shown here. Mostly we are concerned with describing the workings of the callback function useHTTPResponse. In addition to the usual duties of checking the XML HTTP request ready state and status properties, this function undertakes the following tasks. Remove from the display div any display elements from previous RSS listings. Parse the incoming XML to extract the title, link, and description elements. Construct DOM elements to hold and display these results. Apply CSS styles to these elements to change how they are displayed in the browser. To remove the DOM elements installed by previous news imports where they exist, we first identify the div element by using its ID and then use the hasChildNodesDOM method, looping through and deleting the first child node from the div element each time until none remains. The following explanation describes the processing of the title elements, but as can be seen from this listing, we repeat the process identically to retrieve the description and link information too. To parse the XML content to extract the item titles, we build an array title nodes from the XML data stored in response XML. We can then loop through these items, processing each in turn. For each title, we need to first extract the title text using the node value property. We can then create a paragraph element, append the paragraph as a child node of the div element, and apply the text content to the paragraph element. Finally, using the class name property, we can define how the paragraph is displayed. The class declarations appear in a style element in the document head and provide a convenient means of changing the look of the RSS reader to suit our needs. Each time we enter the URL of a different RSS feed into the input field and click the button, the div content is updated to show the items belonging to the new RSS feed. This being an AJAX application, there is, of course, no need to reload the whole page. Because of the security constraints built into the XML HTTP request object, we can't call an RSS feed directly. We must use a script having a URL on our own server and have this script collect the remote XML file and deliver it to the AJAX application. In this case, we do not require that the server-side script rssproxy.php should modify the XML file, but simply route it back to us via the response XML property of the XML HTTP request object. We say that the script is acting as a proxy because it is retrieving the remote resource on behalf of the AJAX application. This listing shows the code of the PHP script. The script uses the curl PHP library, a set of routines for making internet file transfer easier to program. A full description of curl would not be appropriate here. Suffice it to say that this short script first receives the URL of the required RSS feed by referring to the feed variable sent by the AJAX application. The two lines that call the curl_setup function declare, respectively, that we don't want the headers sent with the remote file, but we do want the file contents. The curl_exec function then makes the data transfer. After that, it's simply a matter of adding an appropriate header by using the familiar PHP header command and returning the data to our AJAX application. This figure shows the RSS reader in action, in this case displaying content from a CNN newsfeed. The JavaScript DOM methods, when used with the XML HTTP request object and XML data, provide a powerful means of transferring, organizing, and displaying or processing data that has a sophisticated structure. In this lesson, you saw how DOM elements can be added, deleted, and manipulated to restructure an application's DOM in accordance with XML data received in the XML HTTP request object's response XML property. You can now test your knowledge in the quiz area, access the scripts we learned in the lab, or go through the lesson again. The choice is yours. Thank you for choosing SAM's Teach Yourself.